The desert woke slowly, as it always did. Light first, then sound. The golden edge of the sun crept over the far canyon ridge, spilling warmth across the Whitmore ranch. Dry wind combed the tall grasses in soft, whispering waves. In the stillness of early morning, Clara Whitmore stepped out onto the porch, a steaming tin cup in hand, and listened. A mourning dove cooed somewhere near the barn. The corral gate creaked, as it always did, swaying ever so slightly in the breeze. Normal sounds. Familiar. But then the wind carried something new, a low thunder, distant and steady. She lowered the cup. A cloud of dust approached from the south, barely visible, but rising fast. Her hand tightened around the tin, the heat of it unnoticed now. Behind her, Elias emerged, pulling on his suspenders, his hat already resting on his salt and pepper hair. "They're early," he said softly, like he'd been expecting them. Clara turned to face him. "You told me they weren't coming." "I told you I hoped they weren't." He kissed her forehead, slow and deliberate, then strode past her into the yard, his boots crunching over dry earth. 5 riders came into view. No insignia, but their posture gave them away. Confident, entitled. One man in front, larger than the rest, wore a tan duster that fluttered behind him like a flag of lawlessness. The others flanked him, rifles slung casually. They didn't slow down until they were nearly at the house. The horses sweating, mouths frothing. The leader reined in hard and looked down at Elias. "Morning, Whitmore," he said. His voice was rough gravel, chewed by tobacco and long rides. "McGreevy," Elias replied. Clara stepped down from the porch, her presence quiet but unwavering. "We came to collect," McGreevy said, grinning. His teeth were yellow and uneven. "Water runs through this land, and water's worth more than cattle now. You keep refusing to share." "We've got just enough for our stock," Elias answered. "And for my wife." McGreevy's eyes flicked to Clara, pausing just a moment too long. "She's a strong-looking woman. Bet she could carry a lot of pails." "Don't," Elias warned, low and sharp. McGreevy swung down from his horse. He walked slowly, boots kicking up dust, stopping just feet from Elias. "I'll make it simple. Come with us. We talk it out. You see sense, you come back. Or you don't. Either way, we're taking the water." "You think dragging me into the desert will change my answer?" "I think it'll break something in you. And that's all we need." Clara moved beside her husband, but Elias stepped in front of her. "No, Clara." One of the riders dismounted, pulling a coil of rope from his saddle. The others spread out, forming a wide arc around the couple. Elias turned to her briefly, eyes soft with apology. "Stay here. Don't fight. Promise me." She said nothing, her jaw set, fists clenched at her sides. They tied his hands, not roughly, but with the air of practiced indifference. Clara watched as they pulled him onto a spare horse, flanked him, and began to ride off. Elias looked back once, mouthing something she couldn't hear. Then the dust swallowed them. The silence that followed felt unnatural, like something sacred had been torn. By midday, she was at the sheriff's office. Sheriff Keller barely looked up from his desk. The air inside was thick with stale whiskey and heat. Papers lay in disarray, his badge resting on the table instead of his chest. "They took Elias," Clara said flatly. Keller scratched his head and sighed. "McGreevy again? You know damn well it was. You should have sold them the land last fall." "I didn't come for advice." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "I came to ask what you're going to do about it." "I'm not." His tone wasn't cruel, just tired. "I've got a deputy who won't ride out, a jail with a busted lock, and a town full of folks who pretend McGreevy doesn't exist. You want justice. You'll have to find it elsewhere." She stared at him, incredulous. "He's my husband. He was your mistake, just like my brother was. And my neighbor. And the preacher's boy. McGreevy's been breaking men for 3 years. No one's broken him back." He reached for his bottle. Clara turned and left without another word. The ranch felt smaller without Elias. She fed the livestock in silence, scrubbed dishes that didn't need scrubbing, swept the porch 3 times before realizing what she was doing. The desert stretched beyond the fence line, endless and watching. At sundown, She found herself standing before the old barn. The wind picked up, tossing her skirts around her boots. She opened the door slowly. Dust motes danced in shafts of dying sunlight. Against the back wall sat an old trunk, iron-latched and heavy. It hadn't been touched in years. She knelt, brushed aside the cobwebs, and opened it. Inside were things from a life she rarely spoke of, things she thought she'd buried for good. A dark leather holster with a revolver nestled inside, 6 notches carved into its handle. A Union Army map. A slim, curved knife with an ivory grip. A single silver coin with the face worn smooth. She lifted the revolver, feeling the old weight of it in her hand. She checked the chamber, spun it once, then holstered it. Behind her, the wind moaned through the rafters. That night, Clara packed quietly. A canteen, a coil of rope, matches, dried meat, Elias's hat. She saddled the old mule, slow but dependable, and let it out under the moonlight. The house stood still behind her, shuttered and silent. As she reached the edge of the property, she paused, looked back once, then whispered to no one at all, "You took the wrong man." She rode into the desert, not fast, but steady, like someone who had done this before, like someone the desert should have remembered. The desert didn't sleep, not really. It simmered beneath the moonlight, breathed heat from stone and sand, and whispered secrets only old souls could hear. Clara rode through it like a ghost from another time. Her shadow stretched long behind her, her eyes fixed forward with a gaze that did not blink. The mule's hooves left shallow imprints in the dust, soon swallowed by the wind. Somewhere ahead, Elias was out there, and somewhere near him, McGreevy. The stars above were clear and sharp, pricking through the indigo sky like the eyes of watchful ancestors. Clara rode through the night, not bothering to stop until the first pale light of dawn brushed the eastern hills. She dismounted slowly, not stiff, not tired, just cautious. She had not slept, but she had not needed to. Something deeper than exhaustion pulled her forward now. She crouched by a dry arroyo, ran her fingers through the fine sand, then sniffed it. Horse sweat, leather oil. Men had passed through here less than a day ago. She scanned the ridgeline above, the narrow trail winding west, and knew McGreevy was leading Elias toward the Broken Pass, a place folks avoided when they could. Sparse water, jagged rocks, and enough cover to hide a killing. As she mounted again, a voice echoed faintly in her memory, gruff, southern, edged with fear. "Don't ride out there alone. That desert'll swallow you whole." She'd been 17 then, walking away from a battlefield, her rifle empty, her hand burned to the bone from a jammed barrel. She hadn't looked back then either. By midday, the sun had gone cruel. Her lips cracked. The mule began to stumble. She pressed on. At a twisted outcrop of red stone, she found the first sign, an empty canteen, dented, left beside a boot print with a torn heel. McGreevy was forcing them to move hard, maybe faster than he should have. That was a mistake. Desperation left trails. Near dusk, she spotted a flicker of movement across the flat basin. A lone rider, silhouetted against the fading light, patrolling the ridge with lazy sweeps of his rifle. She led the mule down into a ravine, tied it off beneath a cluster of cacti, and took the high trail on foot. Her breath slowed, her hand steadied, her boots made no sound on the sand. She was within a stone's throw of the rider before he even sensed her. He turned just in time to see her rise from the earth, revolver in hand, the steel already aimed at his chest. He reached for his own piece, but he was too slow. The hammer clicked. "Don't," she said. "You so much as twitch. I'll make your heart forget it ever beat." The man froze. He was young, barely older than a boy, with a beard grown to look tougher than he was. His eyes darted, calculating. She stepped closer, keeping her weapon high. "You McGreevy's?" she asked. He nodded once. "Where is he?" I don't know exact. We set up camp a mile north of the Black Mesa. He keeps moving it. Says it's safer that way." "How many with him?" "3 now, plus your man. Maybe 2 if Hoyt's fever gets worse." She studied his face. Fear and truth lived side by side in his eyes. "What's your name?" "Lyle." "Lyle, you're going to ride south. You'll tell no one what you saw. If you lie to me, I'll know. If you follow me, I'll end you before you reach your reins." He nodded again, slower this time. She turned and vanished back down the trail. Moments later, she heard hooves pounding in retreat. At night, Clara reached the mesa. A single fire flickered on the high ridge, half shielded by stone. She circled wide, moving low along the rocks until she could see the outlines of men, one standing, one sitting with his back to the flames, and a third lying down, coughing violently. Elias wasn't in view, but she heard his voice, soft and steady, murmuring something that sounded like comfort. She waited. The man on watch wandered too far from the circle, relieving himself near the rocks. She crept behind him, grabbed his neck with one arm, and pressed the knife's ivory handle against his spine. No noise. He stiffened. "Where's my husband?" The man said nothing. She tightened. "In the canyon pocket, tied to the mule post." "You going to kill me?" "Only if I have to." She knocked him unconscious with the butt of her pistol, dragged him behind the rocks, and slipped toward the camp. The sick man groaned louder now. One of the others, the one with a thick beard and twitchy fingers, was arguing about water. McGreevy wasn't in sight. She moved around the perimeter, staying low. Behind a patch of sagebrush, she found Elias. His wrists were bound, his mouth dry, but he sat upright, alert. When he saw her, something in him softened and hardened all at once. "Clara," he whispered, voice hoarse. She knelt beside him and cut the rope. "Can you walk?" "I can run if you say the word." She smiled faintly and passed him the knife. "Then get ready. McGreevy's close, and he doesn't know I'm here." A shadow shifted by the fire. Clara turned, pistol rising. McGreevy stepped into the light, calm, as if summoned. His coat was off, sleeves rolled, one hand on his belt, the other holding a cup. He looked across the flames at Clara, a small, knowing grin spreading across his face. "Well now," he said. "Told the boys you'd come. Desert remembers women like you." He raised his cup in salute. "Let's see if it remembers what you're made of." Clara didn't answer. She stepped forward, toward the fire, revolver leveled. The desert fell quiet, as if holding its breath. The fire crackled, throwing spidery shadows across the canyon wall. Clara stood at its edge, her revolver aimed steady at McGreevy's chest. Her boots were planted firm, dress hems swaying faintly in the wind. Elias hovered behind her, knife still in hand, but it was her presence, the raw stillness of her, that drew McGreevy's gaze. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked, voice like dry gravel. "You shoot me. The others wake up angry. Blood won't stop at one man." Clara didn't blink. "You don't know how many I've already buried." McGreevy chuckled low. "I heard about you. Back east. Widow turned rebel, wasn't it? Burned down a cavalry post to save a child. They say you vanished after the war." He lifted the tin cup and drank. "Didn't think you'd come back for a rancher's life." "You didn't think I'd come at all." "I hoped you would." He set the cup down. "Always wanted to see how a legend dies." The cough from the sick man split the silence again, sharp and wet. McGreevy turned toward it briefly, and that was all Clara needed. She fired once. The shot hit his shoulder, spinning him sideways. He dropped with a grunt, scrambling behind a barrel as the camp erupted. The twitchy outlaw, Jeb, burst from his bedroll, fumbling for his rifle. Clara ducked behind a rock, yanking Elias down with her. A second shot rang out and missed, ricocheting off stone with a whine. Another outlaw, the one from earlier, Lyle's brother, maybe, staggered upright and aimed toward the shadows. Elias rose, knife gleaming, and disappeared into the dark. Clara waited, breath steady, pulse low. She remembered nights like this. Not loud, but slow and cruel. She counted footsteps. When Jeb moved closer, she stepped from behind the rock and fired again. His rifle clattered before his body did. The second man panicked, firing blind into the dark. A soft grunt followed, the sound of a knife finding its mark. Then Elias appeared again, face pale, jaw tight, hand slick with blood. "3 down," he said. "1 left. McGreevy's still breathing. Then he'll talk." She stalked back to the barrel. McGreevy lay behind it, cursing, shoulder soaked red. He tried to raise his pistol, but she kicked it away, then pressed the barrel of hers to his temple. "Why take him?" she asked. McGreevy spat blood. "We needed a mule team and a quiet mouth. He had both. You had a choice." He grinned through pain. "I did. I chose what paid. That's what this land is now, lady. It don't care about decency. Only winners." Clara stared down at him. The firelight flickered against her cheek, catching the old scar along her jaw, half hidden beneath sun-darkened skin. She lowered her pistol. Not tonight. Instead, she took his belt, his knife, and his voice, by gagging him tight with canvas torn from his own coat. Elias bound his wrists, then shoulders, then ankles. "We'll bring him back?" he asked. Clara nodded once. The law should see what they almost let happen. They searched the camp. Clara found Elias's wedding band in McGreevy's pocket, along with 2 other rings, a handful of cash, and a brooch she recognized from Widow Park's back in town. She pocketed it all. "You all right?" she asked finally. Elias looked at her. "I thought I'd die out here." "You almost did. You came alone. I couldn't wait." He stepped closer, searching her eyes. "You still wear your war boots." "I don't take off what still fits." He smiled faintly, more in awe than joy. They buried the dead outlaws beneath a shallow cairn. The desert wouldn't care either way, but Clara had learned long ago that death watched how you treated its children. The sick man, Hoyt, had already passed, his skin clammy and still. Clara covered his face and placed a single canteen beside him. As they prepared to ride, the sun began to rise, casting long lines of gold and blood across the broken rock. Clara glanced east. "You hear that?" she said. Elias tilted his head. Wind whistled through the stone, the rustle of brush, and hoofbeats. A lone rider emerged from the dawn haze. Sheriff Harvell, hat low, coat flapping behind. He dismounted slow, rifle across his back. "Damn fool came to town hollering about a woman in the desert." Harvell muttered. Didn't believe him till he said her name was Clara. He looked around at the camp, saw McGreevy tied and bleeding, saw Clara standing like a storm that hadn't finished passing. "Was going to send a posse," he added. "You're too late," Clara said. "They're all dead but one." Harvell crouched by McGreevy. "You did this." "I did what your badge wouldn't." Harvell stood, then nodded slowly. "No argument here." He glanced to Elias, then back to Clara. "You want to press charges?" Clara stepped beside her husband, her hand brushing his. "No," she said. "I want to go home." The sheriff stared for a moment, then tipped his hat and let them pass. Behind them, the desert yawned wide and golden, as if pretending it hadn't tried to kill them at all. It took them 2 days to ride back through the canyons, trailing behind a sheriff too wise to ask questions and too tired to answer any. Elias swayed gently in the saddle, one hand gripping the reins, the other never straying far from Clara's. He hadn't spoken much since the ambush. He didn't need to. In his silence was trust, and in Clara's presence, the weight of something that had once been broken slowly knitting itself whole. They reached the ranch, just past sundown. The porch lantern was still swaying in the wind where Clara had left it, wick burned out, glass smoky. Nothing had changed, and everything had. She helped Elias down, her hand steady on his back, and led him into the house. The bed still held the shape he'd left behind. Morning brought the townsfolk, curious and cautious. Widow Parks came first, her thin mouth trembling as she held out a wrapped bundle of food. Behind her came young Abel from the stables, who couldn't quite meet Clara's eyes, but mumbled thanks for what she'd done. Then others, men who hadn't raised a finger while McGreevy's gang roamed, and women who'd watched from behind curtains, praying the storm wouldn't knock twice. They all came. Clara said little. She nodded when it was polite, accepted the gifts, the glances, the guilt. None of them knew quite what to make of her now. The stories had started before she even returned. A boy swore he saw her ride out of the desert with blood on her boots and a fire behind her. Someone else claimed she'd summoned a hawk with a whistle, and it led her to the outlaws. There were whispers that she wasn't just a widow or a war ghost, but something older, something the desert remembered. Clara let them talk. She tended the garden, patched the roof, and let Elias heal. At night, she sat beside the hearth and sharpened the same knife she'd carried since the war. When Elias asked if she'd sleep, she'd just smile faintly. "I rest when I'm ready." He didn't press. He knew the look in her eyes, part quiet, part thunder. It was the same look from the day she found him, bound and bleeding beneath the canyon stars. By the second week, Sheriff Harvell stopped by. He brought a letter from the governor, some official thanks, wrapped in ribbons and dust. He also brought news. They found another camp, north side of the range. 2 more men, same gang, half-starved. Said they heard a woman in the wind and ran. Clara didn't respond. Harvell took off his hat. "They won't forget your name, even if they don't say it out loud." She looked at him, gaze even. "They don't have to." The sheriff nodded, lingered a moment, then tipped his hat and rode out. That night, Clara stood by the porch with Elias, watching the stars lean low over the plains. Coyotes howled in the distance. Wind tugged at her coat. "They're going to make you into something you're not," Elias said. Clara touched the ring at his side, the one she'd pulled from McGreevy's pocket. "Let them. You're not a ghost. You're just—" He stopped. "You're just you." She smiled then, tired but full. "That's enough." He pulled her close, and for the first time since he'd vanished, Clara let herself feel safe. Not because the world had changed, but because she had. In the weeks that followed, the legend grew louder than the truth. Children played pretend with wooden guns, one always insisting they were Clara of the canyons. Old men passed tales at the saloon, each more embellished than the last. How she rode a thunder horse, how her bullets never missed, how she could disappear in sand. None of them knew about the way her hands trembled when she held Elias at night. None saw how long it took her to let go of the knife on the table. But the legend didn't need those parts. Legends never did. One evening, as the wind kicked up the scent of mesquite and smoke, Clara walked the edge of her land and saw hoofprints leading west. Fresh. Just one rider. She returned to the house, packed a bag with a few supplies, and took her saddle down without a word. Elias found her at the gate. "You're going?" he asked. She looked back at him, her eyes soft. "Not far," she said. "Just long enough to remind the land I'm still here." He didn't ask how long, didn't beg her to stay. He simply stepped forward and placed her rifle in the holster at her back, fingers brushing hers. "Then go," he said, "and come back whole." Clara rode out beneath a sky thick with clouds, the land vast and waiting. She didn't need a map. The desert knew her name, and she knew its secrets. Behind her, the ranch sat quiet, lit from within. Ahead, the horizon stretched like a story, still being written. And somewhere between legend and truth, Clara disappeared again. Just a woman with war in her shadow, justice in her bones, and love in the place she kept her strength.